want to stay here with you forever.
ठीक है
Us together.
खबर आती है हिंदी A film that I watched at BFI London Film Festival, which actually was very hard, traumatizing, but yet deliciously crafted, was Dear Jassi. And I'm absolutely honored to have the filmmaker Tarsem Singh join me today. So, Tarsem, a warm welcome to you on Film Michel Me and a huge congratulations on the film.
Sat Sri Akal.
Sat Sri Akal ji, namaste. Now tell me, ये एक फिल्म है जो आपके लिए it's been there for a while. You've always wanted to work on it. It's been a story that has stayed with you. I think after your process of working on the film, what did you discover about the actual story that took place? A lot more than perhaps you never really realized when you read the headlines.
Well, the headlines can only give you a flash of the truth, and that's kind of the reason I made the movie. Was that when I heard about a phone conversation that a mother had, what she had put out a hit on her child and her husband, is what, when I heard about what that conversation, we had to take it with a grain of salt because it was coming from the people that actually did the killing. So how much of it was true or no, but just even if any form of it was true, I just thought, in what universe does this make any sort of sense? It can never be justified. So I just thought it can never be justified. So then I was very intrigued to make that particular world where something like this could have happened. So actually the whole film was a discovery because of that. So I took that, turned it to basically the events that happened in India in the 90s. And I kind of left India and I'm from Punjab, very close to that area. And I went straight to Canada to my cousins before I went to the US. And I kind of very was familiar with that time capsule on what had happened in those particular times. So I thought, I know this world. I know the people who live there, and I can kind of imagine a situation how this could have gone down. So everything was kind of a discovery to make the reverse engineer it from the point of that conversation and what led to.
And I think to have the backing of T-Series, which is such a huge company in India, and of course Wakaao Films, all these big production houses, to get them on board, वो कितना राजी हो गए थे? काफी convincing लगा था उनको मनाने के लिए, या were they quite instantly on board?
No, they were on board immediately. For me, the thing is, I kind of like when I was doing films before, I didn't really want to do any Hollywood films until I made The Fall, which was a personal film. The moment I did The Fall, I was ready to make all of those. So similarly out here, they asked me, Gulshan Grover introduced me to Wakaao, and they asked me, was I interested in doing commercial films? I said, very much. I love them both. I like personal films. I like commercial films. I'd like to do that. But at the same time, I've got this kind of monkey on my back about this event that happened 23 years ago. Are you interested in doing this? They just said, whatever it'll take to be in business with you. So I said, okay, let's look at a commercial project that we want to do. But at the same time, this is what makes me think, are these the people I want to be in bed with? And they never hesitated. They just pulled it straight away, recommended me one writer. I had one conversation with him, and we were on, and it never stopped. So it took 23 years to kind of, I told my brother when the event happened, that we make the movie immediately, or we wait at least 2 decades when it becomes retro, and I can tell the story. And then we have all the information. So in this particular one, when I approached them, it never stopped. It happened immediately. So Wakaao, and then when we were about to start, they kind of realized that it's a film that I want to intend to make a lot more commercial films later, but at the same time, this is going to be in Punjabi. It's this thing. So all the restrictions in the budget was make at the last second went to T-Series. T-Series came on board immediately. So literally nothing. No, we never blinked. We just went straight at it.
And you know what I really love about the film is that आपकी जो एक cinematography है, it's so crisp. The play on camera work, the way you fulfill every frame with so much minor detail, that beauty actually juxtaposes the really grim, raw, and horrific things that actually happen in the movie. तो आपके लिए वो एक balance लाना कितना मुश्किल था actually Tarsem as a filmmaker? How did you manage to balance both those aspects together?
Well, it wasn't that difficult because usually I'm known for fantastical things. And I told everybody this is not a fantastical film. This is the thing that I'll kind of see the Punjab, and like they say, you always have to be away from an area before you look at it romantically. Like, advertising, it works greatly. Like, Ridley Scott and all those guys, they go from England in the 70s, and then you go to shoot in LA, and they go like, oh my God, palm trees, and they look at it romantically. People from England, they will come to England and say, oh my God, cobbled streets, and they look at it romantically. So for me, I always thought that I didn't think I could see India romantically. So about 15 years ago, I told that when I did my first commercial in India, telling the people that I don't know if I'll see India romantically. And then I did this commercial that was so successful in India that it was the Coke Red commercial, the cricket one that I with the Nasir Fateh Ali Khan song, that I thought like, oh, okay, I guess I have become a Dhobiga Kuttana Gharkana Ghatka, that I do see India very romantic. Then when this story came along, I just said, okay, I don't want to art direct any of it. I'm going to basically observe, just be, it's not CCTV, it's going to be shot cinematically, but there is no cutting. It's going to be completely, the actors have to be the genuine article, and they'll just have to perform in those locked frames. Once I see what they want to do, I will come up with my frame. So it was not fantastical, but it was much more in the style of a lot more how the Iranian, not the Iranian people who make feature films, but something like Shirin Nishat, who's much more surrealist, who makes their cinema. It's much more tableau-y and locked. So I went with that style to go with this and took basically all the romance out of it. But it's still quite a beautiful place, because when you see that and you imagine the hearts, I think it's probably a line from Sherlock Holmes, where I think Watson, when he tells Watson going in a train in the countryside, that we cannot possibly imagine the amount of evil that happens in a farm or in a thing like that, where there isn't another person to observe it, or what humans can be up to. So I kind of took that to heart. And I just said, you show it as it is. Some people will see it as harsh. Some people will see it as beautiful. And then you kind of go into a story which is quite harsh.
And I think I mean, of course, this was dealt, of course, it is obviously based on a true story. But the treatment was almost as if it was like a love story, of course, essentially, right? I mean, we've had so many tragic love stories based on honor killings actually before. We've had Sairat, Marathi cinema's film. Then we've also had Ishaq Zadeh. There's quite been a few films which have kind of been on that. What was perhaps your reference point? I know you just touched on the sort of, inspirations in terms of cinematography and all that, but what was actually your reference point
I've not seen any of I've only seen one. I mean, like I used to see the same movies, if not like three, four movies a day when I was in Delhi University and I was in India. But when I left India, I've only seen one Hindi movie. I've just seen Lagan, because Amir Khan was in LA and he just said, do you want to? And I loved it. I've not seen any of the films that you're talking about. I'm not familiar with them at all. So for me, my reference was much more, it used to be much more surreal than before. But in this particular one, the reference was much more towards, I just said, imagine if you see the films of Haneke, or a script by Haneke, or somebody like Gaspar Noé, who deal with very dark subject matter. If they wrote a script and it got directed by somebody like an Iranian who will look for drama in a boy who's lost his homework and make it like the end of the world. So I just said it's going to be shot like a script for them, got shot by a woman that does an Indian cinema. That was my brief to the writer. So I just said, I'm not going to shoot any of the graphics of it. I'm not going to show any of that. And one little incident ended up in by accident, because they just couldn't perform the stunt that I wanted. That ended up being actually visually graphic. But otherwise, there is no graphicness in it. And I think it's a lot more disturbing, because it doesn't, when people are used to covering their eyes when something bad happens, you can't get away from this, because nothing bad really happens in front of your eyes. Your ears will kill you. So for me, I just took that approach in this particular film, and I just said, I don't want them to get out of the film. So at the same time, why was it a love story? Because they were lovers. So if you kind of go in the beginning and you start talking about how badly the end result is, they'll either come off as naive, not to be able to see what's coming or anything. So you had to see the world from their perspective, how they fell in love, how they thought they could get away with it, how they went to court for the right reasons. They were not that stupid. So they were aware of everything. She came in to fight it through the courts, through everything. It's just that the other side did something that they weren't ready for.
Has the real life Jassi's family watched the film? What was their reaction like when they saw it?
I am not familiar with any of the two sides at all. When I had the choice to see if I would do that, and I just said, I don't want their involvement, because if I did that, the problem would become, will I take a bias towards one side or the other? Or if they say, don't show the I want no restrictions from them. So we legally bought the rights of a journalist who had covered the story. And I just said, we go with that and we tell that story. And I'd love to invite them to see it and say if they have anything to do with it. And I just left it there.
hmm And I think, one thing that I really found quite fascinating, which was another minor detail in the film, is the references of spirituality. Of course, I think, we heard references of shabads and kirtans like Lakh Khushiyan Paatshaiyan. Then there's
Mm.
also a very beautiful sequence where, again, very minor, where there was a photo of Lord Ram on the wall, either in the office or in the airport where he was hiding. There was a scene where he's literally just cowering under, and you can see the mandir just right at the top. The little mandir. And I like the way you've picked up on the spirituality aspect to give the idea that God is watching over what's happening to these two innocent souls. Again,
So never any intention,
I was
never
gonna
any
say,
intention of mine whatsoever. I mean, when we did that, we were not, first of all, you cannot do an Indian marriage, a Sikh marriage by going around the Granth because they don't allow it. If you did that, you'd be married. So we could not use their Shabad from that particular one. So I had them sing it and used photographs. So for
oh,
me, it was nothing got to do with that. The reason that he hid in that particular room was that he had actually gone into a room and could not get into the airport to basically see if there was any danger to her. He hadn't hidden in a room like that, but
mm,
I could not afford to recreate the kind of Delhi airport that I needed to. Then I said, okay, let's base it on his story. Put him, he stayed in a room. He can only see glimpses of her coming. And then when I went to Chandigarh airport, I looked and they had a room like this. So I
mm.
told them, I love that room. Take pictures of it. And we recreated there. That happened to have a little mandir in it. That's how it ended up in there. So
It's
no, it wasn't on the
beautiful.
script. It's not there. They're just all practical issues. And the scene which I wish I could have kept is that he actually takes what do you call like flowers from the mala and
Mm,
actually makes a bouquet for her, which you don't notice now because I took one scene out. I wish I left it in. So he's
yeah.
more like what the Sufis say, that lovers when they unite, that is more spiritual or more closest you'll ever get to God than
Mm,
ever to go to a mosque or to ever to go to a temple or a gurdwara. They
mm,
believe that. So for me, it made much more sense in that he looks at this because he's forgotten to bring a gift for her, but
mm.
somehow it didn't make it in the cut.
Oh my God, it was so beautiful,
You'll
honestly.
notice that he's taking flowers. Next
Yeah,
time he has flowers. So
yeah, but it still worked, to be honest. I think the effect still definitely worked. In fact, I think it had a more profound impact on me, actually.
I think the Indians will get it.
Yeah,
But for the other people, they won't know that that thing is a mandir. That you
yeah.
sit out there and he's doing the prayer, he's lifting that one from there to go there. You don't. But yeah, I hope more people see what you saw.
Definitely. But I think, Tarsem, the position that you've attained for yourself is remarkable. I mean, just to think that you've directed some really high-profile Hollywood stuff, like, of course, Immortals and so many other films you've done, and that too of Indian origin to really break through at that time when we're talking about South Asian representation now, you managed to have survived and thrive and how. But I think when we talk about these dialogues about equal representation because अक्सर ऐसा होता है कि जब हम representation के बारे में बात करते हैं तो हम we necessarily misconstrue fulfilling a void, a gap as representation, but that's actually not true. How do you feel it's tough it's been actually to actually survive all these years in mainstream Hollywood to actually make stories that
Mm-hmm.
are palatable but now sort of tracing your own roots too?
Mm. I'd say for the Hollywood section, it has, I would say, if anything, it has always helped. It has never hurt me that I was the outsider from a different culture making these particular films. I just think there's a lot of stuff that if I did in India, they'd just say, like, that doesn't wash it, give me shit for it. I do it out there and they just say, maybe it's okay in India. I think I've had a license to do a lot of stuff that I would not have had if I was white. So I just say, no, it's never hurt me. It's always helped me. They
Hmm.
need new talent from different places. It's just everything is dictated by economics. If you're making a film for your grandmother and only she's going to understand it, maybe you should just make it in YouTube. It's just when you're making for a broader audience, there isn't as such anybody that's racistly looking at it into thinking like we don't want that because if it's going to make them money, they want it. So if your approach is commercial, it really is immaterial where you come from.
Sure. And I think the fact that, what I loved about Dear Jassi is the way you showcase time and distance through the two countries. Like the wide shots of, at the beginning of the film where she's obviously in her Canada home to the to the Kate where she stay where where the story begins from. Again, there's that whole lush green, but then the hiss of silence that entails as well. I think that was very, very remarkable to see. But again, because you kind of have had that Western and Indian sort of influence on your growing up and on your life.
Dhobi ka kutta, yes.
हम सब ऐसे ही हैं, to be honest. But yeah, I mean, how do you feel like that has really, again, impacted perhaps your perspective and understanding the lens of yourself as a filmmaker when you are portraying both these cultures?
Great question. I just think if you have to think about it, you're overthinking. So for me, on something like this, my background is visual. I grew up, went to school in Shimla, but grew up in Iran. Every year when the school used to be closed down, from the snow in the Himalayas, we used to be in Iran. So I grew up in a lot of cinema in Persian where I could not understand the words. But all my input was always visuals were way above anything got to do with dialogue. That's what critics don't like because they're like, they just go, it's all eye candy. And I go like, but the problem is that is my world. I just talk visually because I grew up visually, always living in countries, the language of which I did not understand, but I saw their cinema. And now you subtitle everything. That time the things weren't subtitled. We just never saw it as that, and I misunderstood most of that. So for me, to come from that particular background, you end up having, if you're kind of doing a drink from the same well, everybody's going to have the same kind of disease, or if it's a disease, or if it's not a disease. So for me, if you really need to have a different perspective, you need to look for the person who kind of travels into different places and brings things from different ones. I lucked out. I had gone from Iran into India, ended up out there, and then suddenly when I came out of school, the medium that was big was music videos. They were just looking for eye candy to go in there. I went into that. Advertising comes along. And when I came to Europe, advertising just became international. They were looking for something that was not dialogue driven, something, a one Levi's commercial that worked in Germany, Italy, and England, and everywhere. The answer was make it visual, but just only have one line written that they can put in different languages. So my strength, let's just say, what was natural to me was what became what they were looking for. So then suddenly you don't need to fix it. It ain't broke. But when I did the cinema, I was always criticized on you don't have enough stuff in the film and you're making it look that great. And I was like, we were taught in school. I just went to a visual school, which is all about polish that turd, no matter what it is, shine it so you can sell it. And I just think when I was doing this, it just came to me naturally. So now when I try to make something look what people just think it should be shot like it's shot with the grandmother's telephone, it's very difficult for me. I just go like, no, I like to shoot like this. I'd rather not move it, but that's kind of where the natural cinema. It's not particularly Indian. It's not particularly Western. It just seems to be the Dhobiga Kutta syndrome. So for me, it's worked there. But I just think like that's kind of me. I don't have to think about it. I just say that lens, this height, cut to this lens, this height, because I do the editing. In this particular film, I just edited myself too. I just usually like to be very much involved in that. So I just say it wasn't about thinking the process through at all. It just comes very quick to me.
But the subject matter at hand is actually very terrifying, and it's very sad that we actually had a case here in the UK. I'm not sure if you've heard about it, Surjit Atwal case, which again was very prolific, and it was very shocking to hear that this also happened here. So when I heard about Jaswant Singh Sidhu's case, I think it definitely really sort of shocked me as well. But how do you feel, maybe collectively on a more samajik thought, but in a social level, what conversations would you like to also take place now? I think regarding this issue, because as a film, you definitely have stunned, you definitely have engaged us, but in terms of actually trying to question society and the system, what do you think can necessarily evoke a change?
Okay. Very good. So for me, when I look at this, I don't think it's a religious issue. I think it's a toxic environment from a cultural issue. It's something when people look at this and say something like, oh, this is really bad that is happening now. I go like, no, this is still the greatest time ever to be alive. It's minimum number of people ever dying. It's just people are looking at it dramatically, the current events, because now they can see it visually. Like if they, to quote Mark Twain, if it's, dog bites man, that's not news. It's the other way around. So for me, you can see all that. So when people see 50 people die on a YouTube or whatever, they just think the world's coming to an end. And I would just say that it is getting better and better. It was a lot more horrendous at the time that we grew up in the 70s when you used to have floods in Bangladesh. It would be like 200,000 people dead. You had a drought, 5 million people dead. And now when you have those things, when you get 100 or 200, it's the end of the world. And I go like, no, you've always had serial killers. You've always had these disasters. They're becoming less and less. The reason they look more is that you're being able to see them. You're looking under the carpet for this crap. So for me, I would say that these killings and all that are much less than they used to be before. They were just never questioned. We now show the questions. We show you the environment where it happens in so that we can question it even more. So I just say it's becoming less, but we need to tend it towards zero, which is a big ask. It'll take a long time. So just have that conversation with as many people as you know who immigrate to a new culture. It happens with the Irish, happens with the Indian anyway. When you go off, Armenians, anything, they'll just go together to stay in that particular thing. Because the place, no matter what you have to do to get out of, you tend to look at it much more romantically and glorify it and forget all the problems. And within one generation, you're in that capsule where the people back home are 20 million times have moved on more than you and have evolved. And you are this little capsule that's being much more conservative and wondering the girls in India have telephones and wear miniskirts. And I go like, yeah, you left long ago. You are the bigger kuta. Just go back and take a look. So for me, the conversation would be that, talk about this environment. How does this happen? And actually question the people who live in it. But it's not a religious problem. Muslims do it, Sikhs do it, Hindus do it. It's horrible. It's sometimes religious, sometimes it's economical, sometimes it's political. In this particular one, it was financial. Just the guy's way below your station. Why the fuck are you getting married to him? Because none of your sisters will not get married.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're very rightly said there. I think in terms of I think going forward as well. I mean, Dear Jassi, so obviously I think it had a great reception at Toronto, and I think even at LFF it's done really well. But I think what's in the future now for Dear Jassi? When are you securing a release date officially? And
Great.
yeah, and second part of the question is, what sort of stories would you like to explore next? I personally would love to see you explore more Indian stories the way you've done.
Well, first question first. First, we're looking for distribution to see what we can do worldwide. That we'll probably release it next year. So in India and everything, you will go. So we're doing the festival circuit to get enough eyeballs on it, and then figure out how we can get it out there to get more people and get Indians to basically get India to represent this film. And so I will be coming to India with it, trying to show it to as many festivals or whatever is possible. That's one thing. The second question, what's next? I don't usually know. I do have, I used to always just concentrate on one thing. Now I have like 5 or 6 boiling and I see which one comes to the foreground. But ideally, what I started with Wakaao and all was that I wanted to do a really big action flick in India. And then
nice.
Unfortunately, I turned around and do this. So now I've done that and I just go like, okay, send me. And now that script has just come in the next week or so, I'll read it. And if that happens, if it goes as fast as this one, we'll be on it on 2 seconds. So
wow.
I don't know what I'm doing. In the meantime, I have a day job. I love commercials. I love music videos. I'm always working on those, but love to do more stuff in India because I think it's gotten so much more fun to film in India than it did 30 years ago when I started.
And I think also, there's a sense of pride, I think, that we all have now, to be very honest. Like, I feel a lot, I mean, I've always been very proud to be an Indian, to be honest. I consider myself Indian more than British. But, I think now what's also happening is because the floodgates have broken so much. I mean, the fact that RRR, such a beautiful song that was so anti-colonial, got an Oscar. I think it's definitely really brought eyeballs as well to India now. Like it's kind of becoming a lot more of a superpower, and I think it's great, isn't it, to kind of see that happening as well. I mean, how do you feel about that?
It is. I'm not really particularly familiar with enough Indian cinema to comment on it. So I would just say like I just do my own thing. It happens to be Indian sometimes, it happens to be Western sometimes, and I just go like, it's okay. I get to tell that storyteller and get enough of my DNA out, get my genes and my memes out there. So I just basically do it with that in mind and not particularly think that this is Indian, that's not Indian. It's just that I remember when we were in school and I was learning, my girlfriend was a photographer and she was brilliant. And she used to always tell me that I had no taste because I like photography like an Iranian, whose work now I love. So for me, when I looked at that, it took me a long time to learn to see the world in her eyes. And I used to really envy people who got up and did a picture or did a particular frame or anything like that, and you could see their DNA in it. I did not have that. I had to work towards it. But now I feel really good that after about, I would say even about 15 years ago, when somebody said, we can see something that you do from the first frame, and I go like, whoa, good on me. Because I just think, and then they started saying it looks Indian. I said, like, I don't think you've seen enough Indian cinema. That doesn't look Indian. And then after some time I realized the only thing that they were talking about was it was too colorful for the Western eye. That was it. I was just thinking, yeah, in India, the poorer you are, the more brighter your clothes. So yeah, you tend to do that. So I just think like I like color. So that just came naturally. I don't think about it. And now after some time, I can see that, okay, I see what they're saying, that according to the Western eye, you don't put that much color in a make unless you're making a 1950s, Ektachrome film with, RGB. And I just go like, nah, it was a conscious effort and now it's just in the DNA.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I feel like a lot of these films, like especially on the Western front, it's like unless if you've got some sort of form of poverty in it, they don't really necessarily give it much tawajjuh. But I'm just like, Hamare India is greater than poverty, bro. Like it's not just like the colonial states that you left it in. Like it's evolved so much in such a positive way. But at the same time, I think that's why Dear Jassi works because it touches on a very, very sensitive subject, which is so rampant, but yet it amalgamates so much. I think that's why it's
that's a great choice of words that it is. No, I want to use that actually. You said, sorry, what did you say exactly? Rampant. Yes, that's exactly right. That if we don't, pick up the carpet to show people underneath, then you just show how beautiful the carpet is woven. And I think in this particular case, we just need to do that. So the carpet's great, but look at the shit underneath it. So I never looked at India romantically. I love going there. I love this thing, but you have to come to terms with how India is. And if you go out there, you're just going to be one of those people that comes and bitches about everything. That why is the electricity gone? Why is guys like when you left, there was no electricity here. It used to be 45 degrees in the fucking shade, and now you've gone abroad because you have electricity all the time. You're talking about why is there no electricity in the afternoon? It's just gotten better, but don't judge your necessities because in India there will be luxuries to certain things. So just take it for what it is. But I do that when I go to Africa, when I go everywhere. So don't fight the system for what they're struggling to make better. If you can accept it, or make a comment on it. Otherwise, you'll just be miserable.
Absolutely so true. And like I said, it has improved so much as a country. I mean, going there, I've felt that change. And I think that's what's definitely evoked that sense of pride. And I think it's so wonderful that we have, representations like yourself that's really championing some great work in the West. And I really hope that that continues as well in the future for sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Tarsem, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me on Filmy Shamina. Namaste. Thank you so much.
Take care.